In this video, we're going to delve into an idea that I believe could be seen as the big lie. It's not only the big lie of our current era, but also the big lie spanning the last several centuries. If you've seen that Fox video discussing romantic love and similar topics, you probably know what I'm referring to, right? It's the notion that women are superior to men, Marianism and such, which has been prevalent since the 11th or 12th century. But the big lie, to put it simply, is the notion that women are meant to be companions for men, and that in fact having a woman in a man's life brings improvement, making his life more enjoyable and fulfilling. This idea is so deeply ingrained that our society, much like many others, has always tended to shame the man who doesn't have a partner, who isn't married, who doesn't have a woman in his life, right? It's as if there is something inherently wrong with that man. And that's precisely why it is a significant lie. It's a substantial falsehood because it is on the foundation of this deception that women uphold and ensure their privileges. It's on the basis of this grand lie that society sustains itself, and in a way the state sustains itself as well. So, let's begin by dissecting this enormous lie. Firstly, the notion that women are partners. Well, if women are indeed partners, I can only say that they are partners out of convenience. What exactly would a partner of convenience be? Well, it would be someone who stays with you during the good times, when you have leisure time available, and when you have extra money to spend. They are, in essence, companions of convenience, conditional companions who are there when it's easy. They are utilitarian companions. For those who are already familiar with my content and the content of others, I believe Roque made a video on this topic. I hope it's available on YouTube discussing Breifeld's law in more detail. If a woman doesn't see the benefit in being with a man, she won't pursue a relationship. She'll only stay in the relationship as long as she sees value in it. Isn't that a conditional utilitarian relationship? So, if you're in a relationship based on convenience and conditions, is that truly a partnership? It even states in the Breifeld law that if she perceives no benefit, she will terminate the relationship. How many stories have I heard, and perhaps some of you as well, about situations where a man loses his job, and then his girlfriend or wife leaves him? Or consider this scenario. A man and a woman are enjoying a good relationship, but suddenly the woman gets promoted, achieving a financial and social status above his, and then she no longer wishes to maintain contact with him. Similarly, the question of modernettes with diplomas and higher education, and they refuse to engage in relationships with men lacking a degree, even when those men have incomes 2 or 3 times greater than theirs. So, you see, the first part of this lie is the notion that they are companions, because in reality, they are dependent. And once you grasp that, once you truly absorb the concept that men and women are not equal, and recognize that men are the producers, women consume in society, men produce, and women depend. And this also relates to my theory concerning the micro and the macro, which posits that everything you confirm in human relationships is validated in both the micro and the macro levels. In the micro, this would be within a couple, and in the macro, it would be across society as a whole, dividing the population into men and women. Therefore, if women aren't equal partners but rather dependent in relationships in couples, then naturally, as a consequence, they are also dependent within society as a whole. And anyone who has researched videos and content about this can validate my statement. There was even that video by Black Pigeon Speaks, which is probably no longer on his channel, but some people must have translated it and several people have made videos about it, which was about a study in New Zealand. It must have been in the middle of 2012, something like that, that they did the calculations, and logically New Zealand, a Western state, a welfare state, right? And they concluded that in New Zealand, it's only men who pay taxes. By the end of his life, the man paid an amount ranging somewhere between 50,000 and 150,000 New Zealand dollars to the government. Essentially, he created a surplus. On the other hand, the women, they consumed approximately that amount, or possibly even more, because it must be another country that's accumulating debt. So by the end of their lives, the women found themselves in a situation where they were consuming far more than what they contributed to the system. No matter their empowerment, education, or career, they still consume. So micro and macro theory comes into play. If they're dependent and men are the producers and providers in relationships, this also reflects in society, right? Then there's another issue, because the first part of the big lie is the idea of them being partners, which we've already dismissed. It takes it away, it ends it, and once you let go of the idea of equality between the sexes, it becomes far easier, much more apparent, and much simpler to accept. From the moment you let go of the idea of equality, everything starts to make more sense, both in micro and macro terms. So, here we go. The second half of the lie, that there's something wrong with a guy who doesn't have a woman by his side. Right? A woman enhances a man's life, making it more enjoyable. Let's analyze this. If she's just a convenient partner, a utilitarian conditional partner who stays only while benefiting, how does that enhance his life? Right? Does his life improve or worsen? Indeed, we might say, maybe it does make his life more pleasant. Yeah. It can definitely make a man's life more enjoyable if he's someone who tends to be a loner and has a particular emotional dependency. However, this type of validation and emotional satisfaction can be achieved in ways other than through a romantic relationship with a woman. For instance, it could come from spending time with family members, adopting a child, having pets, or engaging in voluntary work, or something along those lines. He was about to gain social validation, and he was going to have a companion in that, wouldn't you agree? Now, you might argue, but what about a romantic relationship? Sure, later on, there will be developments in artificial intelligence, robots, and so forth. However, this notion about the companion has already been shown to be false. How is she a companion if it's just convenient? Is she a companion who stayed with the man and family, fulfilling that oath in sickness and poverty only because divorce wasn't legal? Because, you see, there was a significant stigma surrounding divorced women and couples who split up, right? So, essentially, the only thing that kept women within the family structure was the sense of obligation, right? The legal obligation to remain there. And, of course, the stigma, the negative consequences, and the potential punishments, right? So, ultimately, this type of companionship is not one that genuinely makes a man's life easier or truly improves his life, no matter how much he might develop feelings for this woman and grow to like her. And then the other thing I mentioned is that, as I said, they are dependent, right? Men in society are the ones who produce, while women are the ones who depend on them. Men act as the producers within couples, and women are seen as the dependents. Once you grasp this concept and let go of the notion of equality, the system we live in starts to make perfect sense, right? Because if you consider it from this perspective, society generally agrees that it's acceptable for a woman to leave a man for various reasons. For instance, if he's not fulfilling his role as a provider, or even if, heaven forbid, he has an accident and ends up unemployed, requiring her to support him. Just think about that situation. The woman naturally dislikes providing for the man, right? She's not able to be responsible for him like he is for her. That's why we say a woman isn't a companion, a man is. I also claim a woman doesn't love in the same way. She loves in her own way. In fact, when she loves, it is actually herself that she is loving. She becomes attached to and loves someone who offers her benefits, making female love essentially a form of self-love. On the other hand, men's love is distinct. A man's love tends to be more sacrificial in nature because he is not only capable of taking responsibility for his partner, but he also finds satisfaction and incentive in doing so, right? So, once more, we see this dynamic at both the micro and macro levels. The same dynamic that applies to a couple also applies to society as a whole. When you really examine the way the government functions and the way the laws are structured, right? The types of laws that are put into practice within society, the traditions, what is deemed acceptable for a man to do and what is deemed acceptable for a woman to do, you begin to see that this notion that the man is the one responsible, the man is the provider, while the woman is considered the dependent, does make perfect sense, doesn't it? Why did the government establish the dynamic between the sexes in that manner? The entire legal framework like that? Is that the reason why we have the family court system set up the way it currently is? Could it be why our government public policies are structured in their present form? This is why women are treated differently in various aspects of life, not merely because they never truly desire equality. Whenever they are given the chance to choose between equality and preferential treatment, they consistently opt for preferential treatment. This is what we call a female imperative. Once more, it aims to secure the highest amount of resources and benefits, while exerting the least possible effort and assuming minimal responsibility. Pay attention as I mention responsibility once more. Similarly, a woman isn't truly a companion. She is merely a companion when it's convenient for her. She is not able to take responsibility for the man, nor can she provide for him. Furthermore, even when it comes to children, it is not accurate to claim that women are always capable of caring for their children under any circumstances. What we've come to understand from the experiences over the past 50 years is that women tend to care for their children only when they possess the necessary resources. Without these resources, they often end up abandoning their children, leaving them in the care of grandparents, putting them up for adoption, or finding alternative solutions. So, this question of women being companions of convenience, right? Being a utilitarian business, a conditional business that simply aims to benefit her, that doesn't just extend to relationships with men, it even extends to relationships with children. Then you might say, but Raccoon, there are cases where the woman takes care of the children no matter what. Maybe it's because she's gotten so attached to the child, right? I mean, I'm not sure, but perhaps her financial situation worsened, or maybe she lost a partner and still kept taking care of the children. It's because she became attached. Once again, consider that aspect of feminine love. She'll continue doing it because she feels she's gaining something from it, even if the benefit is merely emotional. Additionally, there is another condition, which is that when a man takes care of his children, he is doing so to help them grow independent and eventually lead their own lives. When women take care of their children, what they're really doing is ensuring that in the future, they have a guarantee. The children are being nurtured so they can eventually become their providers. We've already received numerous inquiries about this subject. If you examine the dynamics of relationships involving single mothers or divorced mothers, particularly those with older children, you'll find that they often develop a type of relationship with them known as emotional incest. She begins to turn her eldest son into her husband, who has to take care of her and who will have to take care of her in the future. So you see how this behavior of women is instinctive. It's a behavior that won't change. It's a behavior that affects the micro. It affects the macro. At the end of the day, they're not capable of being responsible for others. In some cases, they're not even responsible for themselves. They're not partners. It's just a convenient arrangement. And ultimately, they act like dependents. Just observe the laws they support. They desire dependency. Naturally, after the second wave of feminism, they seek the same power and authority as men. Yet they still wish to remain dependent. They want to pretend to be independent. Because we want to be at the same level as men, at the same level of political power, perhaps even more power, the same level of authority in the family, perhaps even more authority. But they don't want to make the same contribution as men. They don't want to be as responsible as men. So to conclude the video, let's address the first lie, which is the concept that they are companions. In reality, they are not. They are companions only when it is convenient and they are dependent. The arrangement with them is conditional and utilitarian. This leads us to the second aspect of the lie. Do they enhance a man's life or make it worse? Setting aside subjective values and the emotional aspect of validation, let's be objective. If she is not truly a partner, but rather a partner of convenience, then ultimately, is she actually a dependent? Society, culture, laws, and the government often treat them as dependents, placing the responsibility on the nearest man. This could be a brother, husband, boyfriend, or even an older son. So, let's delve into this matter. Is a man's life improved or worsened by having a dependent? What do you think? Let's explore. A man without a dependent doesn't have the obligation to be responsible for someone else, especially in today's world, wouldn't you agree? Being responsible without having authority is a unique challenge. Consider if he's better or worse off than a man who has no dependence at all. The man without dependence is free and only needs to worry about himself. So that's it, my friend. That's the big misconception. The notion that they are companions and that they improve a man's life. They do provide benefits to the man. And this deception is crucial to uphold because it is through this falsehood that women are able to secure their current standing in society. It's through perpetuating this lie that they hold on to their privileges. Furthermore, it's this very lie that enables the government to continue setting up that little trap like a cattle pen, ensuring that people get married, have a few children, and ultimately become wage slaves. This cycle continues as they are drawn into it, especially in cases of unilateral divorce, where there's a need to divide assets, and when unilateral custody is involved. Do you grasp why this falsehood holds such significance? This is essentially a misleading lie. It's a lie designed to make the man who is thriving, who enjoys freedom and independence, believe that he's actually in a worse situation and feel bad about not having a woman in his life. That's just a mirage, an illusion, a lie. How can you'll be at your worst, even if you're at your best. You'll be with someone who isn't a real partner. She's a partner of convenience, someone dependent. That's why it's crucial to abandon this lie, because once a man decides to let go of this falsehood, he not only gains independence instantly, but he also starts to expect more from himself and others. He no longer has that fear of not having a woman in his life. He no longer has that fear of being alone. And above all, he's aware that he's the producer. He's responsible. His wife is the dependent one. So every time, from that moment on, every time he has a relationship with a woman, he's going to have a relationship with her on his terms. Even taking into account current laws, a man may come to the conclusion that it's not worth having a relationship, not with a woman. Once more, he's adhering to his own terms. Perhaps his terms would suggest that we should live in a more conservative era, or maybe the laws need to be improved, right? Nevertheless, if he believes it's still worthwhile to have a relationship, even if it's just a casual one, or simply dating while each person resides in their own home, from the moment he comes to the realization that, in truth, he's objectively better off on his own, and that the woman is merely a companion out of convenience, a dependent, and ultimately he bears the responsibility, what becomes of this relationship dynamic? How does this shift in understanding impact their interactions and the balance of the relationship? Compared to the slackers out there who are absurdly terrified that their wives are going to leave them, or cheat on them, or are afraid of ending the relationship and being alone, the guy who isn't in that situation is simply going to have a relationship with the woman. And the moment the woman starts to become a nuisance to him, becomes a problem for him, he's going to do what that comedian Patricia O'Neill used to do. Tell the woman the door's there. Aren't you happy? He is able to exit the relationship the instant the woman issues a threat or an ultimatum. He will terminate the relationship immediately because he knows that he and the woman are not on equal footing. Society does not regard them as equals. Furthermore, the woman serves as a companion of convenience. She is there for the enjoyable moments, when there is extra time, surplus money, and when he is in a pleasant mood. When the going gets tough, she tends to leave, because she's really just a partner of convenience. Above all, she's not capable of being responsible for the man if he deteriorates, since society as a whole treats her as a dependent, and she desires to be treated as such. So, ultimately, is it always the man's responsibility? Does he need to be constantly aware of this, so that he can choose to relate only when it is beneficial for him? When the woman brings some bonus, perhaps not an objective bonus, but a subjective one in his life, or maybe the woman will make his life easier. If the woman makes his life easier, we know that this is something that hasn't existed for 50, 70 years. That was back when women were educated and trained from an early age to realize they relied on men, and without one, their lives would worsen. To balance the man's sacrifice of responsibility and care, she needed to do something for him. This is no longer present today. In numerous situations, women might even begin to express their dissatisfaction by the second day of work. So, that concludes this video.